That's it. The law of the schools. Okay. Some very interesting information is found here, and it has much to do with where it leads us. Let's see, there's a bit. Okay. There's a fair amount to it before we actually get into the planetary schools. Well, we will have to begin with the law of the schools. It's an aspect of the law of attraction. Very interesting, its name, the law of love and light. How often the people connected with these schools sign their letters, love and light. It seems to be a blend of the second and third rays. The Masonic organism comes under the first ray. The church organism comes under the second ray. And the banded esoteric organisms come under the third ray. So there is something about this education movement which is under the third ray as well as the second. The law of love and light. This is a mysterious term used to cover the law as it affects the expansions of consciousness which an initiate undergoes, and his ability to attract to himself through knowledge, and then we'll see what he attracts. So, if we're talking about expansive consciousness, certainly in a general sense, there is a Jupiter effect and also Mercury. When I think of Master DK, I think of both of those planets, Jupiter and Mercury, although I think in the lives of Alcyone, I have to recheck this, different figures appearing at different times in the lives of Krishnamurti are called by different names, and I think he is one of the appearing ones, and I think he's called by the name Uranus. But I don't know why that's particularly appropriate. He certainly has the comprehensiveness of Jupiter and the pure reason and the comprehensive knowledge of Mercury. So an initiate undergoes expansions of consciousness, and he attracts to himself his own higher self, so as to produce alignment and illumination, which comes in at initiation 3, true illumination. But of course the higher self doesn't pay so much attention. If we look at the higher self as the solar angel, the fifth petal of the egoic lotus has to be certainly in process before it really begins to focus its direct attention and become a downward gazing soul. Before that time, the general second aspect furthers the progress of the man in the unfolding of the egoic lotus to begin with. So he attracts his own higher self through increasing knowledge. He attracts his guru, which in this case is a master. He attracts that which he seeks to know, as the knowledge is always there, and if the invocation is correct, the knowledge comes within the range of apprehension. Okay. He attracts that which he can utilize in his work of service. See, we should test ourselves. Have we attracted these things? He attracts other souls with whom he can work. So the minute you sound your note, you will be attracting those with whom you can work. They may come in strange shapes and sizes. You will sound your note and the note will attract those for whom you have something of value. So knowledge, the increase of knowledge is an attractive factor, and so we can see Mercury and Venus certainly at work. You know, we wonder how will things come to us that we really need. Well, what we have to do is not just pray for them, we have to actually work along a particular line and begin to put out that which we think the world needs, and others will come. Think about your life, you know, the people you've helped. You know, oftentimes you've had to at least put up your sign, you know, the name of your organization. People read it, it sounds a note, and they begin to inquire. So think about the people whom you're serving now. How did they find you? Word of mouth, internet, what you've written, perhaps. It's sometimes quite unusual who swings into your orbit on the basis of the note you put out there. It will be evident, therefore, to the thoughtful student that the law of the schools is primarily applicable to all units of divine life who have arrived at or transcended the stage of self-consciousness. It applies the transition from self-consciousness to group consciousness. It's an aspect of the law of attraction. You know, he gives us many subsidiary aspects of the law of attraction. Interestingly, this is the 11th division. It looks very Gemini. The number 11 is Gemini or Aquarius, and that fits well with what is conveyed in the schools. It has consequently a vital connection with the human kingdom, which is a self-conscious kingdom. That's why it has that. A self-conscious kingdom. And there is an occult significance in the fact that this is the 11th law. Well, you know, it's Aquarius leading to the group. It's Gemini leading to the knowledge which the soul has and which can be conveyed to the personality. That would be Gemini. It is the law which enables a man to unite two of his aspects, the personal self and the higher self, the ego on the higher mental plane, and there is a contributing of the solar angel to that higher self. You know, I mean, what is the higher self our own structure on the higher mental plane, or is it in fact the solar angel? Okay. It is the law which, when comprehended and conformed to, enables a man to enter into a new cycle. So it opens doors, it leads to initiation. It is the law of the adept, of the master, and of the perfected man. The number 11 stands for the hierarchy of masters. For this reason, it might be of profit if we dealt with it a little more fully than with some of the other laws, of which there are 10 preceding this. For mankind is now at the stage where a number of units are ready to come under the specific influence of this law. Now, in the Cosmic Fire commentaries, I've already written an analysis of the law of the schools. Some of you may have received that. But I think it's better to just kind of discuss it as it comes to us, rather than to be locked into what I wrote before. We are coming, a number of units of the human kingdom are moving from self-consciousness to group consciousness. Thus, they are ready for this law. and thus they can be transferred out of the hall of learning via the hall of wisdom into the fifth or spiritual kingdom. Now, sometimes the hall of wisdom is not mentioned. It is the third hall, in a way, and it is equivalent sometimes to entering the kingdom of souls. And it happens when we begin to pay attention to the seventh, eighth, and ninth petals, and when we start to be initiated. So we have the hall of ignorance, the hall of learning, which is the love petals, and the hall of wisdom. When we talk about ignorance, we don't mean that such people have no knowledge in their mind. It's just that they are ignorant of the soul nature. They have three petals unfolded. They may be quite a significant personality, but they don't know much about the pairs of opposites or the higher self, which comes in the second group of petals. This law of the schools does not specifically apply to the Deva evolution because the doctrine of initiation operates differently in the Deva kingdom. And this law of the schools certainly is education for initiation by the initiator. They come under another law called the law of passive resistance, which does not concern us here, nor would it profit us to consider it, but they have to be molded by inner energies into forms which conform to the divine plan. And it seems that built into them is this condition of not immediately responding, at least for some of them. So, we've heard about passive-aggressive people. They are aggressive by simply not responding. And the Deva Kingdom members have to become increasingly responsive, and their tamas has to be overcome. Their tamasic vibration has to be overcome so that the rajas aspect of response comes in more powerfully, and eventually sattva is there for rhythmic response to that which is intended by their superiors. Anyway, he doesn't want to talk about this law of passive resistance, but let's just say if we're dealing with the devas of the lower three planes, they are colored by the moon chain and they are colored by the previous solar system, and they do resist the agenda that is found in our solar system. And getting them to be more alive and responsive to that program is what the redemptive work of humanity is all about, lifting those lives out of passivity to ready response. Three main groups of existences are controlled by it. Are we talking about passive resistance here? Let's see. No, I think the law of the schools. Controlled by it, the law of the schools. Human beings, from the moment they tread the probationary path, they've had what you call the initial reversal of the wheel, which is occurring in the fifth petal, and they are becoming at least aspirants, not just powerful integrated personalities, but they sense a higher self, however they may name it, and they want to move towards that. So the probationary path begins before the initiation, first initiation. Although sometimes it is said that the probationary period doesn't end until somewhere between the first and second initiation you are an accepted disciple. In a way, you're on probation all that time. He says two different things. Sometimes he talks about probationary discipleship, discipleship, and accepted discipleship. And sometimes he just talks about probationary discipleship and accepted discipleship, as if all the way up to that point when the second initiation is somewhat in sight, like it was for so many of DK's students, you are simply a probationary disciple. Even if you've taken the first initiation, you are still a probationary disciple from one perspective. Okay, so this law of the schools applies to those who are treading the probationary path. In your mind, is there a distinction between the path of aspiration and the path of probation? Is there? Or do you think of them as pretty much the same thing? In other words, the path of aspiration comes, as it were, first. Right. And the aspiration concentrates on your high desire for some new spiritual experience, but it does not concentrate upon your willingness to be tested and to pass tests. As a matter of fact, aspirants per se are pretty fickle. They come and go according to how they feel about things. There's more will on the path of probation. So certainly the path of aspiration precedes the first initiation, as does quite a majority of the path of probation, the probationary path. You can assess who are the people that come to you for help. Where are they? Are they aspiring? I suppose minimally they would be. Although if they're not, you can help direct them onto the path of aspiration. But some are already aware that they are being tested, and you can help them pass their tests using astrology, esoteric psychology, helping to clarify that through which they are presently passing. All right, so the law of the schools, it applies to human beings from the time they tread the probationary path. All the units of the fifth kingdom, they're all members of the hierarchy, therefore. So it extends quite far. The members of the hierarchy are, well, like I showed you the other day, you could say that many subsidiary initiates are members of the hierarchy, but this is telling us that even the masters are involved in the law of the schools. Yes, this is a law which is really important because DK per se is a superb schoolman, if you will, a scholar who has introduced to us the idea that 14 new schools are on their way over the next centuries, and that we can begin to prepare to participate in them. And maybe that is, they will be supervised by an initiate in some cases, or an accepted disciple in others, and they will have behind them the presence of the master, who will pass all students in inner review each year, giving to the director of the school advice as to how this particular student shall be handled. This will lead to initiation, either the second or the third initiation. So, I think a lot of us here are animated by that vision of what will be possible, and we're trying to prepare for it now. Back in February 7th, 1997, we had a meeting here at Humlegården. And February 10th, we had a meeting in the United States and also in Australia and New Zealand. And 4 of these schools were meditated into existence, as it were. And they have had a checkered career over the last 14 years. 14 years is an important number of years. It's just about half of a Saturn cycle. And the founding of the Moria Federation is an attempt to extend that whole New Schools initiative. So in a way, being involved in these kinds of classes, you are, to some extent, part of this New School initiative, which can only intensify as we apply ourselves. In our next life, let us hope that the schools will be up and running, and the opportunity, that open door for real illumination, will be presented to us. Would anybody like to participate in such a thing? You come back. Come back and give it a try. Even if I'm there, this is the discriminating question. We all have a certain destiny. Sometimes you can think ahead to what it might be. You know, people are trained along a certain line, and they don't necessarily jump their training path back and forth. The leader is trained as a leader, the teacher scholar as a scholar, the business person as a business person, and it tends to have continuity from life to life. Also related to the law of schools, the planetary logoi throughout the system. It's a very comprehensive law, all the way from the probationary path human being to a planetary logos who many Mahakalpas ago was at the stage where a master is now. So what a huge expanse that is. And of course, you know, this law of the schools tells us really something about the quality being cultivated and expressed on these different planets. We have really picked a planet, many of us, probably because of our relationship to the moon chain and maybe even to the earlier solar system. And why are we on this planet and not on another planet, even though we may have begun on another planet? Because there's no guarantee that this Earth has been here the whole time. So, you know, why am I on Earth? Of course, that has to be answered maturely and not in the manner where many people say, well, really, I'm from the Pleiades. Of course, really, everybody is. You know, so there's nothing distinctive about that. The Pleiades is the hub of the central wheel, and many, many stars and constellations are the result of its work. But the Pleiades are simply peripheral to still greater centers. So I guess, you know, we might as well get used to it. There's a lot of interest in the universe, and it's going to last trillions and trillions of years more. So we might as well get used to being here and enjoy the ride. It will be apparent, therefore, that this law concerns the great experiment which has been inaugurated on Earth by our planetary logos in connection with the process of initiation. A forcing process, correct? People like to talk about it, but when they actually realize that they're going to be forced, something in their personality may rebel. And it has only held sway since the door of initiation was opened in Atlantean days. And that may have been, I think, you know, Philip Lindsay, he's an excellent theorist about the history of the planet. His hidden history of humanity is really worth having, reading even. And he said maybe in the 5th subrace of the 4th race, this was when the door of initiation was opened in Atlantean times. It was millions of years ago. So the law of the schools has not been operative on our planet since that time. And it probably was the opening of the door of the initiation which may have facilitated the great battles between the lords of the dark face and the lords of the shining countenance, the two opposition factors. Because when initiates carrying the light start to emerge, then it's bad news for the Black Lodge. And the planetary logos had decided that this could be done. The Christ and the Buddha were initiated back in those days. They took the 3rd initiation millions of years ago in a 4th ray ashram and have since transferred to a 2nd ray ashram and have become heads of all the ashrams. It does not therefore apply to all the members of the human family, some of whom achieve slowly under the sway of the basic law of evolution. So basically, I'll make a generalization here. those who have been informed by the solar angel, not that by the solar angel, can participate in the law of, no, that's not it. LOTS? No. No, I don't have an abbreviation. It does not affect in any way, for instance, those members of a human family who have individualized on earth through the fanning of the spark of mind, one of the methods employed by the lords of the flame as earlier seen. So there are two principal methods of making a man back in the early days of individualization on our planet. One of those methods has to do with the solar angel actually taking up residence as a point of fire, as a spark of mind within the brain and mind of the animal man. And that is the more rapid method. But some people, or animal men at that time, were just not ready for that. And instead, the solar angels fanned, blew upon, as it were, the mental unit until it became incandescent and led to individualization without the presence of the solar angel within them. They still have causal bodies and so forth, but it's not informed by the presence of a solar angel, and later, in another round, it will be. They will be associated with the solar angels. So there are some people on Earth for whom a general hothouse forcing process just will not work. They do not have the solar angel in them at this time. Others of us, we may have been individualized on the moon chain or other places and have, I believe, affiliated with a supervisory solar angel in this particular dispensation in Atlantis and have carried that solar angel with us. Maybe some few are studying these things who actually were individualized on Earth, but not so many. Even some who were individualized on Earth have made it into the hierarchy. The Christ is one, and there are some others, and that's extraordinarily rapid progress. Yes, Anne. What about those who came from the moon chain? They've already got some petals open. So, and the solar angels were not involved in producing those petals. But my impression is when they came into incarnation in the third subrace of the fourth root race on the moon chain, they were assigned a solar angel to help them continue their evolution. And if they were not, they would be very far behind now even primitive man. That's what DK tells us. Really quite amazing. So the solar angel is a huge time saver. Millions of years of sacrificial attention has saved us millions of years of suffering in a lesser state of consciousness. We're trying to learn the kind of selflessness that Buddhic being, the solar angel, displays. Of course, it was part of the plan, but its failure was not part of the plan. Yes, the moon chain was the third chain. It had its own function. Its place is now taken by something called the Saturn chain. And through that particular vehicle or chain, the planetary logos experienced a failure through excessive compassion. It's possible to spoil a child. You say, I'll do everything for you, anything you want you can have. And he was too liberal, too giving, not disciplined enough, too compassionate for a certain type of life that he let out of the den, as it were. So now you have to get that life back into the den and make up for all of that lost time when a condition of chaotic relationship called lunacy prevailed. What is lunacy? Normally consciousness has a structure, and it is fairly coherent, fairly stable. Things are relating to each other in a predictable manner. But in lunacy, anything can relate to anything else in the most bizarre manner. No true relationship exists, and certainly not in line with any kind of plan. So chaos prevailed. The chaos of the mind, the chaos of the psyche. And the whole planet is somehow subliminally affected by that lurking chaos which came from the moon chain, and which we call, lunacy. If you've ever been in a madhouse, people say strange things and do strange things. We say it's bizarre, meaning because it has no real connection with what looks like sane thought process. And that was let loose on the moon chain. But the chain, of course, was a chakra. And a chakra is necessary. Okay, is what a hangover from earlier times? Yeah. I think those people are very responsive to the whole astral plane in its lunar aspect. Yeah, and maybe because of where they've been and what they did or didn't do. Interestingly, however, we're told that if you are in danger of veering off onto the left-hand path, the ego, soul, solar angel can drive you mad for an incarnation or two, just to disorganize your intent effort to become selfish. So there is sometimes a reason behind the madness, which is the will of the soul. So HPB talks about the moon as, the divine lunatic. And we are carrying that burden now. So Saturn, something called the Saturn chain, has emerged as the third chain, and the moon chain is no longer a vehicle for the planetary logos. It's a decaying body, which still has a bad effect on Earth. So, but the story is that as the rounds go by, the moon, physical body of the moon, will recede, getting smaller and smaller and smaller, until by the end of the last round it will be disintegrated, and we will no longer be carrying that kind of burden. But that's a long way, so the moon is still very important in the natal horoscope as the prison of the soul, but also as the means of transforming the personality, and just as certain built-in tendencies, which we all seem to have, and they're just there, second nature. So we cannot discount the moon. It's very important. Okay, so we have two methods of producing individualization. There really are some others, actually. The solar angels in those old days, some of them, in their full consciousness, stepped in to those great vehicles, huge, immense vehicles that men were using at that time, and they actually made the sacrifice of occupying those ill-favored forms, and thereby became the god kings. And it said that their descendants are a special hereditary group in humanity now. He doesn't go farther and talk about it, but he does say, yes, the descendants of those early god kings are with us, and they represent a special hereditary group. Then, of course, they implant an aspect of their own nature under the principle, having pervaded the entire universe with a fragment of myself, I remain. So in a way, they are in us. A fragment of their consciousness and power is in us. A triple spark containing mind, love, and will is in us, on the plane of mind, and within the brain, actually. And the third method is just increase the heat of the mental unit and help people thereby individualize, but don't look after them. As if you are supervising them, they have to slowly evolve on their own until the day comes when they can be associated with a solar angel in the next round. I think some of the anthropoid apes are in that condition now, because they've actually been individualized. but they fell back. And some of the most primitive tribes are in that condition where they are not supervised by the solar angel per se, even though the solar angel helped them individualize. Interesting ideas. Okay, so it can be studied in two main divisions. First, in connection, the law, right? The law. Whoops. The law, I'm going to try to make this into one of these abbreviations. Okay, law of the schools. Let's see if that works. Okay, the law of schools can be studied in two main divisions. First, in connection with the human units passing under hierarchical influence in the hall of wisdom. Not just the hall of learning, it's not enough. You have to start to enter the hall of wisdom from the time of the reversal of the wheel. Now, sometimes we're told, say, when do you enter the hall of wisdom? When do you enter? At the reversal of the wheel, or when you enter the petals of sacrifice. Anyway, usually the hall of learning is considered to occupy the entire second tier. But we begin reversing the wheel in the hall of learning in the fifth petal. But sometimes it's called, approaching the hall of wisdom. So it can be studied in connection with human units passing under hierarchical influence in the hall of wisdom, and also in connection with the various planetary schemes. So we will not only work in relation to our own humanity, but try to see what the humanity of other schemes may do. Each scheme exists in order to teach a specific aspect of consciousness. That's quite a statement. So from the second consciousness aspect, something is taught on each planet, and we can determine what the teaching is. Now, we don't necessarily have to go to that planet to receive the benefit, because in a way those planets are here too, and they teach some aspect of what they teach on their home planet to us on this planet, through our different chakras and through the different chains and globes. They are present. And each planetary school or hierarchy subjects its pupils to this law only in manners diverse. These planetary schools are necessarily governed by certain factors, of which the two most important are the peculiar karma of the planetary logos and his particular ray. Well, DK has said a little bit about Earth karma. It's the karma of personality. Somehow our planetary logos has issues to work out in relation to the level of personality. And also, at the time he wrote this book, he did not yet give us the rays of the planet, but now we know what they are, because in esoteric astrology he gave them. So a third ray personality, second ray soul, first ray monad. We're really a 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1 planet. Very interesting. And I don't think there's any other quite like that. I think we're unique in that respect. So we have big issues in terms of elemental power of the personality, and our rays tell us something about the kind of school we're involved in, and probably our second ray soul is quite involved in determining the kind of planetary school we have, because the word magnetic is being used, the magnetic second ray. Okay. It is not possible at this stage to convey to students the information as to the nature of each planetary school. They exist in 5 great groups. Think about it, what did these Tibetans know? All of this comes out of this Tibetan doctrine. It's certainly not that which modern science has revealed to the Tibetans. But it does seem so rational in many ways that how did they investigate these matters? Maybe through the powers of initiation, these things are deeply and extensively known. Okay, so anyway, there are 5 great groups of schools. Let's see what they are. The exoteric, non-sacred planets, called in occult parlance the outer round or the outer circle of initiates. All these planetary logi are, after all, initiates of various degrees. So we sometimes hear of the inner round. Anyway, this is the outer round. Earth is included, Mars, Pluto. He tells us about Mars. He doesn't tell us about Pluto. He tells us about Earth. He doesn't tell us about the veiled planets that may be veiled by the sun or the moon. These are Earth is one, but being aligned in a peculiar fashion with certain spheres on the inner round, a dual opportunity exists for mankind which facilitates, while it complicates, the evolutionary process. So somehow from Earth we can access the inner round, and I would say via Mercury, because Mercury is always associated with the inner round, and there's a definite connection between Mercury, Venus, and the Earth. Special opportunity is offered in the inner round, and the temptation, of course, is to lose touch with the outer realm of service. He just hints at some of the ideas of the inner round, but certainly Mercury is involved. Okay. So Earth is connected with the outer round, but also touches a planet or more which are spheres on the inner round or relating to the inner round. Okay, non-sacred planets. The sacred planets, sometimes called, when this law of the schools is under consideration, the 7 grades of psychic knowledge, or the 7 divisions of the field of knowledge. In other words, psyche is soul. And all of these planets are expressing as soul. So that means Vulcan, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, Venus, Neptune, and Uranus, not Mars. And whatever non-sacred planet may give us the 7th ray. Maybe it's something veiled by the moon. Okay. So far we have the outer round and the sacred planets, the 7 grades of psychic knowledge, or of planetary soul knowledge. All right, the inner round, which carries with it vast opportunity for those who can surmount its problems and withstand its temptations. Usually, a temptation of this kind is not all about falling down, it's about falling up too far. You know, in other words, wanting to be great rather than actually falling into some low form of life. Abandoning the path of service, perhaps. This inner round has peculiar appeal to units on certain rays and has its own specific dangers. The inner round is the round that is followed by those who have passed through the human stage and have consciously developed the faculty of etheric living and can follow etheric cycles. So somehow the 7th ray is important in relation to this inner round. Functioning consciously on the 3 higher etheric planes in all parts of the system. Now, this is the question. Is it, are we talking about systemic ethers or cosmic ethers? or cosmic. Anyway, the fourth ether is not considered to be esoteric, and those who follow this path are detached from it, which is the reflection of the Buddhic plane. Sorry. Yes. They have, for certain occult and specific purposes, broken the connection between the third etheric and the four lower subplanes of the physical plane. So that sounds pretty much like we are talking systemically down on the normal etheric plane. So whenever we read about something called a broken connection, we have the possibility of disintegration. So broken connection can lead to separation. So is ray 3 involved, one of the factors of which is separativeness, and ray 7, both of which are etheric in nature from a certain perspective. This round is followed only by a prepared percentage of humanity and is closely associated with a group who pass with facility and develop with equal facility on the 3 planets that make a triangle with the Earth, namely Mars, Mercury, and the Earth. Okay. 3 planets that make a triangle with the Earth make a triangle with the Earth. Mars, Mercury, and the Earth. Okay, so Mars is part of this as well. These 3 planets in connection with the inner round are considered as existing in etheric matter and in relation to one of the heavenly men hold a place analogous to the etheric triangle found in the human etheric body. Well, Earth is the base of the spine, but in the human etheric body, Earth is the throat center. Mercury is the ajna center, and Mars is the solar plexus. Are those the 3 centers involved? Are the ajna, throat center, and solar plexus the 3? I have here conveyed more than has yet been exoterically communicated anent this inner round, and by the study of the human etheric triangle, its function, and the type of force which circulates around it, much may be deduced about the planetary inner round. Okay, well, we would have to study the relationship of the solar plexus and ajna. See, interestingly enough, Mercury is not the ajna immediately, but for initiates it is. Venus is the ajna immediately. But beyond the 3rd degree, and sometimes it's even said beyond the 1st degree, Mercury rules the ajna center. Earth is definitely the throat center for a man, and Mars we cannot find in any place but the solar plexus. So we have here the 2 clearing houses, the solar plexus and the throat, and the center of direction. 2 clearing houses, solar plexus and throat, and also the ajna, which is the center of direction. So in other words, we're getting the idea that ether is very much a part of this inner round. Now, Mercury is definitely an etheric planet. There are 2 signs particularly connected with the etheric body. They are Gemini and Aquarius. And Mercury is certainly connected with both of them, actually. Mercury rules Gemini, but Mercury rules the second decade of Aquarius, and all the circulation of prana through the ethers is much related to Mercury. But there still is the danger of detaching from the physical, detaching from manifestation, and maybe ignoring one's duty. We know the old story from the Secret Doctrine about how some of the solar angels did not come in when they should have. At least that's the story. And as a result of not coming in when they should, they had a much bigger job to handle later when they were willing to come in. Well, he doesn't mention Pluto. He doesn't mention Pluto as related to the inner round. You say? It is, but when dealing with the inner round, he has 2 non-sacred planets and 1 sacred planet. So if he doesn't mention Pluto, we just have to say we don't know. We can remain alert. Now, both Pluto and Mercury are related to the base of the spine center, and the base of the spine center is related to the etheric body. The different chakras, base of spine, etheric, solar plexus, astral plane, Saturn, or third ray, mental plane, the throat center, the heart center, Buddhic plane, and the head center, Atmic plane. That's what he gives us. But Pluto is definitely associated with the base of the spine, which is associated with the ethers, but here he just doesn't deal with it. We must bear in mind in this connection that just as the human etheric triangle is but the preparatory stage to a vast circulation within the sphere of the entire etheric body, so the etheric planetary triangle, passing from Earth to Mars and Mercury, is but the preparatory circulatory system to a vaster round, included within the sphere of influence of one planetary lord. Well, you know, if you look at these 3, in some theosophical writings, Mars is in position of 3, Earth of 4, and Mercury of 5. So in terms of globes, you have adjacent globes. They are Mars, Mercury, Mars, Earth, and Mercury. So these 3 form some kind of continuity. The question is, you know, probably the inner round in relation to Mercury is much different from the inner round in relation to Mars. And I would have to ponder how that would work. I know that there will come a time when Mars will be the destination of 2/5 of Earth humanity because they will not be able to stay on the Earth. It will be too advanced for them. When it comes to Mercury, that's one of those planets that leads to the advancement of Earth and will probably be very influential at that time, the Judgment Day. So in the Judgment Day, far ahead, not the normal thing we talk about in today's world, but in the 5th round, the triangle Mercury, Venus, and the Earth will be important, and the triangle of Venus, Mars, and the Earth will subside in its importance. Mars will subside in its importance, and it will serve to train those who are not yet ready to continue evolving on our planet. Because Mars, in a way, is less, what would we say, less advanced than our Earth. It is by no means a sacred planet. It causes much trouble here on our Earth, and the Earth is already inwardly sacred. So we have these 3 planets in relation to the inner round, and we just have to ponder about the etheric opportunity. The interesting thing is when you're considering planets occultly, their outer rind doesn't make any difference. The physical nature of the planet doesn't make any difference. You look at it from the etheric point of view, that's considered to be the true physicality of the planet. Okay, so that's a section that needs that needs a lot of going over. I think I have things on the inner round. You know, I've collected those things. There's not so many entries, but they are of interest, and the idea that you must avoid dangers and temptations, and that separativeness is possible, says something to us. It's a faster way of evolving, but always we may, while evolving rapidly, forget the opportunity for service. That is also a temptation. Okay, so what have we got so far? Non-sacred planets, sacred planets, the inner round, and number 4 is the circle of the planetoids, which I don't know what he means by that. Does he mean those which have their own circulation around the sun, or those which revolve around some of the bigger planets? And we sometimes call them moons, but maybe they're not moons at all. Maybe they are just junior planets being nurtured by the presence of the major planet. Because remember, a moon is a past scene, a scene of previous life. A planetoid is not. So he's not telling us exactly, but let's see. Students of the Ageless Wisdom are apt to forget that the life of the Logos manifests itself through those circling spheres which, though not large enough to be regarded as planets, pursue their orbital path around the solar center and have their own evolutionary problems and are functioning as part of the solar body. So he seems to say they have a solar orbit. And that maybe he considers the planets that revolve around another planet as moons. We will see. They are informed, as are the planets, by a cosmic entity and are under the influence of the life impulses of the solar logos, as are the greater bodies. Now, we seem to be discovering a lot of lesser planets out there. We're adding all the time to their numbers, and maybe even within Pluto, we will be discovering some etheric planets that are radio sources, and maybe they will be considered planetoids not yet in full expression. The evolutions upon them, and there are apparently, are analogous to, though not identical with those of our planet, and they swing through their cycles in the heavens under the same laws as do the greater planets. So when we're on the path of the planetary logoi, there are probably many stops along that path, becoming root manus and seed manus and globe lords and chain lords and planetoid lords before finally becoming a planet per se. Many are the possible steps on the way to becoming a planet. Okay, so he seems to say they are not moons. But, you know, sometimes when you look at those bodies that are circling around Jupiter or Jupiter or Saturn, they seem as much like planetoids as they do like moons. They don't seem to be former bodies of activity. Then finally, the absorbing triangles. This term is applied to the evolutionary schools found in the 3 major planets of our system, Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn, and he doesn't give us Saturn for whatever reason. He gives us Uranus, sorry, and he gives us Neptune. And are those found in the 3 major chains and 3 major globes in a planetary scheme. So the preparation for these more advanced schools takes place right on our planet. Takes place on our planet. The rulers of these planets, chains and globes, and remember, every globe has its own lord. 7 of them, 10 of them. Every chain has its own lord. So these are the different steps on the ladder of evolution for those who are involved in planetary development. The rulers of these planets, chains, and globes are called divine examiners, and their work concerns the human kingdom specifically and entirely. Interesting. They are responsible for the work of, and apparently it happens, point A, transferring men from one school to another and from one grade to another. Well, Uranus, we know, is involved with progression, but so is Neptune and Saturn. For the expanding of human consciousness under the law. They are responsible for the transmutation of the forms of the human unit in the 3 worlds and the consequent negation of form. They are responsible for the radioactivity of the 4th kingdom in nature, which will mean that the inner part of the egoic lotus of humanity becomes radioactive, radiatory, all under the synthesizing planets. Now these are, you read this in study group, right? Okay, it's not easy. It's, but I think it does suggest something about how things are run in our solar system and on our planet. Let's see, did the law transferring from one school to another under the law, yes, under the law, yeah, it sounds very Saturnine, yes. There are certain rules by which consciousness does expand, and we cannot throw away those rules. So they are examiners, and they're very strict, and they're very high, and they operate not only through planets, but through chains and major globes. Now, which are the major chains? Which are the major globes? Somewhere DK talks about this a little bit. In Cosmic Fire, around page 600, around. Let's see if, yeah, here are major ones. Major rays, major chains, 1, 4, and 7. Major rounds, it doesn't talk about major globes. It doesn't necessarily talk about major planets either. But 1, 2, and 7 gives the idea. Perhaps Vulcan, Jupiter, and Uranus. Anyway, you can examine this page 600. For this system, the major rays will always be the dual rays, the negative positive rays, the masculine and feminine rays, this being a dual system. The major rays for system 3 will be those in triple manifestation. The following table may be found of interest if regarded as relative and as holding information for the present time, and also as being subject to change and circulation. Thank you. Okay, but it's really interesting to study. He does not talk about the globes, but he certainly talks about the rounds and about the root races, 3, 5, and 7. Sub-races within any root race, 1, 5, and 6. Initiations, 1, 4, and 5. He considers them major at this time. 600. Okay, so Pretty soon we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what's actually going on the planets, but this is the preparatory thought. We might regard the presiding lives in these departmental schools under this law of love and light as the custodians of the path, because we tread the path in the schools, and responsible, therefore, for the divine pilgrim during the final stages of treading the path of evolution, namely from the time the probationary path is taken, from the time you're a master, from the time you're a planetary logos. So the law of the schools just does not apply to the average individual. But for ourselves, since we are involved in this kind of work, learning in these schools does apply. They begin to work with men, the custodians do, from the moment they first set foot upon the probationary path, and they continue their work until the 7th initiation is taken. And even then, it does say that the planetary logoi themselves are concerned with the schools, and they are far beyond the 7th initiation. So right now, since we are treading the path and have begun this type of work, we are all coming under the law of love and light, the law of the schools. Any questions or comments on this thus far? Well, you know, when we're first exposed to these kinds of thoughts, we just have to take it in. There's not a whole lot we can say at first. Maybe implications will begin to occur. The important thing is, are we learning our lesson? If we know what kind of school we're involved in here on the earth, as we tried to do in our meditation this morning, we can compare our life with the lesson to be learned and assess, are we learning these lessons? As they are being rather forced upon us, you know. There's no way out of the will of the planetary logos with regard to these schools on this planet of releasing sorrow and purifying pain. Graduates of painful endeavor and adjudicators between the pairs of opposites. That's us, apparently torn on the cross and divided between solar and elemental life. This is our curriculum. The masters, therefore, who take pupils for training are numbered amongst the supervisors of the schools, while the masters who do not concern themselves with individuals and their development are not. In other words, maybe if you are a master who cares about the animal or plant kingdom specifically, you are not involved with the law of the schools. It is not possible to give fully the types of schools and teaching which is given on the different planets. All that can be done is to give an occult phrase which will convey to the intuitive student the necessary hint. So hopefully we can develop intuitive group mind and see what hints are given here. I mean, why would we be interested in this about what's being taught on another planet? After all, is it practical? It might not seem to be, except that via astrology, whatever is being taught does find a way of entering our consciousness and energy system because of our chakras, which are invocative fields for these various planetary rays. And according to the ray that we are on, so we might have a particular affiliation with one of these schools. And maybe we began on a planet that was not the Earth, and will be returning to a planet which is not the Earth, and will be involved in this type of work. It's my impression that those who are on their way to Sirius will have to stop by Venus first for pre-education. A little Syrian kindergarten on Venus before they can travel. The Jupiter is a stopping point also for a certain path, maybe for the planetary logoi path. So in our solar system, there are some of these advanced schools which are part of our path that the monad will take one day. Now, of course, I know a lot of people who say, well, I'm on this path. I know it. But remember, that decision is not made until the sixth initiation. And maybe by the time we take the sixth degree, we'll know a little bit more about what's the right thing to do than we can assess at this time from our quasi-personality perspective. I think that's true. Well, I think he almost says it, that the path of descent is the path of reascent. He does seem to suggest it. But it's interesting, that the Buddha chose incorrectly. So the Tibetan says, very reverently may it be said. The Buddha chose the path of earth service, a path which was not at all his path. Probably when he became enlightened. He decided at that point of cosmic illumination to stay with humanity, which he's done for the last 2,500 years, and which he will do for the next 2,000 or so years, even though from Shambhala. So, in other words, it's a completely free choice. And it is possible to make mistakes. Apparently the Buddha was to have the path to Sirius. But probably the Tibetan says that path will not now claim his attention. And I think, well, we do wonder why. My impression is that it's more the path of the planetary logoi. And we'll study the 7 cosmic paths. I think it would be very interesting, wouldn't it? It would be very elevating when you talk about destiny and where we all might be headed as monads, not as little personalities. What was I going to say? It was something about where the monad, yes, it's about the Christ. The Christ, sorry, is on the ray path. He's becoming a pure cosmic ray of love. But wherever else his road may take him, ultimately, says the Tibetan, Sirius will be his destination. He is an example of a Syrian initiate of a certain quality. Probably he is a transfigured initiate in terms of Sirius at this time, in the Syrian system of initiation. But who knows, these numbers start to widen out. And we, the little progress we make from the second, third, fourth, fifth initiation is just tiny amount of time. Before that was a huge amount of time on the path of evolution, and after that, a huge amount of time widening out on these cosmic paths. So our little forcing process going through the tube in the hourglass, very thin, very fast, very few years, just a few thousand years, and then things really slow down. But it all, in these days, when the farthest people can think of going is either to appear no more and be dead forever, or to spend eternity playing the harp, probably badly, or with 72 wives, it seems like an alternative needs to be given to predict a more appealing future. There will be an incentive to people to undertake the discipline that is necessary. Right now, our sense of destiny as human beings is pitifully ignorant. But this teaching holds the sense of destiny, and it seems somehow very coherent and very logical. So we have quite a responsibility. Okay. We can begin a little bit, and then we'll, when we reach 11-ish, we'll take our first break. The schools. Some would have liked to just jump right in and study the schools, but I think that what he gave us is a good preliminary. We have to be patient. He wrote it for a reason. Uranus, the school of magic of the 10th order. It is sometimes called the planet of the violet force, and its graduates wield the power of cosmic, etheric prana. Now remember, Uranus has a first-ray monad, and so does the Earth. So there's quite a connection, spirit connection between Uranus and the Earth. The orders are interesting. The 10th order tells us something about the position of Uranus. I'll show you this. See if I can find this thing. Yeah, that's one of them. I think there's probably a better one, though. When I reach Alice Bailey, I know it's all over. Well, that's another one. Oh, here it is. It's the one that Tuya made. Well, Pluto is not part of this. In this particular case, Uranus is the 9th planet. If we were to include yet another planet, it would be the 10th. The number 10 is a 1, and Uranus is the first ray monad. Sometimes in the Tree of Life, we have the 7 Sephira below a line. And above the line are Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn. Although sometimes Jupiter is put in the place of Neptune. But I think that Jupiter can be put in the place of Chesed, or mercy. Well, it's possible too, because here is the greater Saturn. There is Saturn, the planet, which by the way has a double circle, and then there's greater Saturn, which includes all of these. So you could say it's 7 plus 1 plus 9 plus 10. You could say that. But in the Tree of Life, Uranus is definitely in the 10th and highest position, taking the place of Kether, the highest force, the ultimate supernatural, essential first-ray force. So Uranus is interesting because it's a violet planet from its soul perspective, but what is it from its monadic perspective, which is first ray? Yes. The what? Well, that's for Aquarius. That's for Aquarius, and I think that Uranus's higher color is electric blue. It is a scintillating blue, and Uranus has an unusual position because it's very much a 1357 planet, except that it's part of a chain of forces from Sirius to hierarchy. Sirius, Uranus, hierarchy, heart center, solar plexus center. So you know that chart where there are three great constellations, namely Leo, ray 1, Pisces, ray 2, Capricorn, ray 3, and Uranus is in the second ray line. So there may be something there that allies it to the blue color as a first ray, a high first ray planet. But right now, we're not dealing so much with the monadic nature of these planetary schools. We're dealing with their soul or systemic nature, where the soul or the teaching is coming from, and that's the second aspect. And we can say that Uranus is a seventh ray soul, though a first ray monad. So that's why it's called the planet of the violet force. But there's a huge amount of will involved in this planet. And I think one of the important things to realize about it, what is cosmic etheric prana? And where does it operate? And more. And more. Okay, cosmic etheric prana, and maybe not even so much manas, is these higher four planes: intuitional, spiritual, monadic, and divine. So in a way, Uranus rules the color violet as it applies cosmically to the cosmic ethers. See, no matter what color deva you have on these higher four planes, the basic underlying color is violet, because cosmically this is the etheric, cosmic etheric level. So I believe the cosmic physical plane is divided like this. Uranus rules the upper four ethers and the kind of prana, which is high spiritual energy, which operates on these four cosmic ethers. And what planet do you think would rule the dense physical body of the solar logos? Saturn, exactly. It's Uranus, Saturn. And so that's just the same as way down here on the systemic level. Uranus rules the four systemic ethers and Saturn the very densest level. So somewhere Master Moria says that Armageddon is a battle between Uranus and Saturn. And we have had that opposition in the sky for quite a while. And we still, to a degree, is pretty much past now, but the forces of the past and the forces of the future, the etheric forces which are giving us the new archetypes, and the conditioning forces which have established the world as it is, whether or not in line with the archetypes. So Uranus is the magical process. What is magic? It's about bringing higher energy forms into expression in worlds that have been conditioned by all kinds of forces, and thereby rearranging those conditioned forces so that they truly reflect the archetypal energies which Uranus brings in. And of course there are means of doing that. Yes, what was the first word? Reason and necessity, yes. Let's just say that pure reason reigns on the cosmic ethers. Necessity or conditioning reigns in the lower worlds. And it's according to the law of economy. And pure reason is according to the second ray of divine ideas. And we're trying to get those archetypes into our preconditioned Saturnine world. Of course, there's a big battle whenever that happens, and we've seen it already. Here, a lot of these young people were rebelling, they want something new, and the forces of Saturn basically shoot them. We're going to keep the status quo. So it's been dramatized on our world stage, and it's in process right now. So basically, will humanity go via the conditioned world of Saturn, or will it open to the newer Uranian possibilities? Uranus has an awful lot to do with presenting those newer possibilities. Mm-hmm. Uranus has difficulty pursuing his magic because Saturn, people are not able to live up to the Saturnian standards. Cosmic physical plane, in one sense, we are in the school of Saturn because the whole cosmic physical plane is ruled by Saturn, in a way, a larger sense. Cosmic permanent atom, Saturn represents that on the logoic plane. What is the mysterious relation between these planets? And I was reading a long time ago a book about the rings of Saturn and Uranus. Something which is in the rings of both of them is related. And they sound differently. When the Voyager was going past, it was catching the magnetic fields. There was a different sound. He did deal with the three rings of Saturn in relation to the bridge from the previous solar system. But he didn't deal with rings of Uranus because, in a way, they had not been discovered. Tenth order, Capricorn 10th sign, and the 10th order and the rings. Yes, I think those are ideas that can be put together. Yes, and well, let's wait till we get to the description of that planetary school and see what role we think it might play. Let's just say that Uranus is the planet of white magic, particularly. You can do a lot of magic with Saturn, too, in terms of the old rituals, but they just keep the status quo. So can we wield cosmic etheric prana? Well, that's like saying, are we an initiate? Can we receive buddhi? Can we receive atma? Can we receive monadic streams? Those are cosmic etheric pranas. So before we could respond, even on our planet, to the influence of this 10th school, we'd have to be quite a bit up there, moving into the spiritual triad. The school of magic for the 10th order, the planet of the violet force, and its graduates, which are presumably are masters by that time, wield the power of cosmic etheric prana, and especially logoic force, because Uranus is more connected with the logoic plane, veiled by the sun, than any other of the planets. It's not so much connected with the monadic plane. It is, but, not so much. With Atma, yes, to a degree. With Buddhi, well, it enhances intuition. But in terms of the sea of fire, that's where Uranus really has its power. And that is the highest realm of archetypes. The sea of fire, the logoic plane, the highest plane. That's what DK calls the causal level. It is above the world of being. It's above the world of ideas. It is the major determining, pattern-making area for Shambhala on the highest plane. Yeah, and I was thinking about the highest plane ruled by Leo. Could be sun bathing Uranus. Right. Yes, and yeah, there's a kind of a correspondence with solar logoic mental permanent atom, which comes in under Uranus. So anyway, this is really all he says about it, and in order to train ourselves in line with this school, we need to become white magicians, and we need to build the Antakarana, and we need to somehow receive those higher impersonal energies of the spiritual triad so we can wield them to a degree, which would be, after all, cosmic etheric prana. Okay. It, well, okay, yes, but the manas factor is still in the dense physical body of the solar logos. There is a kind of atmic manas which can be done, but basically the lowest part of our spiritual triad is not included in the cosmic ethers. So we have to make a discrimination there, I think. Just below the threshold. But there is an atmic, since the atmic plane is the third, to be influenced by Atma is to be influenced in a way by a very high reflection of divine mind. It's ruled by Saturn, it's the third ray, and there is a kind of high monastic purpose with the atmic plane, which is mental. Could you say a few words about Uranus being the ruler of Aquarius, Libra, and... Well, it's interesting about, it's one of the rulers of Libra, which is related to Atma. See, it rules on that level. It's one of the rules of Leo, which rules the highest logoic causal level. It rules Aries, which hierarchically, takes us up to the fourth hierarchical plane. So, and it rules the lowest of the lives of the hierarchies down on the very first plane. And if you continue laying the zodiac on cosmic planes as we go on, it rules the second level. It rules the second level of the cosmic astral plane, because that's an Aquarius plane again. So I think we have to see what are those energies that are available to us from these different levels, and what are the ways that Uranus helps us access them. When it comes to the logoic plane, it seems pretty clear. There's a great causal patterning in Shambhala, and Uranus is responsible for that. It's the hierarchical ruler of Leo. I don't even want to comment on its relationship to Aries on the cosmic astral plane. Maybe when we can get into the discussion of the cosmic astral plane and the higher hierarchies, okay. What about in relation to Atma? Sometimes I've wondered, is Uranus Manas and Saturn Atma, or is Saturn Manas and Uranus Atma? They seem a little bit interchangeable. But there is a very high type of occult mind, which we can say Uranus is involved in when related to Atma. There's something called super mind, and it's connected with the atmic plane, and Uranus may be involved there. But there's also something called universal mind, and maybe the relationship of Uranus to Aquarius, still higher up on the cosmic astral plane, might be part of that. So these are abstract issues. I don't think I can really say anything terribly coherent about them, because it has to do with how we relate to energies which require the building of the Antakarana to know anything about. In terms of just radioactivity and the livingness of matter, which we are coming into now for the last hundreds of years, obviously Uranus is involved with the revitalization of matter and its evolution towards radioactivity. And that seems clear in the lowest order of lives. Okay, you said, can we participate in this school? Yes, well, that's my contention. You can't really participate in the school per se, but you can participate in a stream of influence which will help make you a white magician and will help you connect two types of prana. Cosmic prana, which is the goal of our spiritual development, and normal prana in the systemic ethers. So, the true white magician has his head in the cosmic ethers and is able somehow to bring them down and express them in a kind of magic which corresponds with the divine plan. Now, there's another thing. On the third level of the cosmic physical plane, it's Atma. It is the origin of the divine plan. So in a way, the Leo part is purpose, Uranus, and from another point of view, the Atmic plane has some Uranus in it and may reflect that part of the divine plan which reflects the purpose. Uranus, Uranus. To be worked out in the ethers right here on our systemic level. We could probably take it all the way up to the top and say, what does it mean for Aries? But I wouldn't even want to hazard that yet. It's just, it's just beyond, I think, what we can do. Okay, well, look, it's time for us to take our little break, and we will come back in 15 minutes or so, which means about 25 minutes after 11, which means 25 minutes after 9 GMT.